Hello chess lovers, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about endgames, and I'm going to present the topic of endgames to you from an angle which I think is really awesome, and I hope that you are going to feel better connected to this whole topic after watching this video. The endgame in general is an area for many club level player, improver, call it whatever you like, where either they have a very strong dislike towards the whole situation on the board, and or they feel utterly lost as to what to do and how to do. And so these two feelings, usually combined, lead to them disliking the endgame. And I do think that the vast majority of players, club level below, who are bad at endgames, they are actually bad at it because they don't like it. And what I have to tell you is that I think that every single chess player has their own learning journey, and in that journey, usually they do come across an endgame, which they, not their own, but somebody else, like in a book or in a course or whatever, where they look at an endgame, they analyze it, they read the book, they read the annotations, they read the analysis, and something just clicks. And they go like, wow, this is awesome. And actually, it's really not that hard. And usually that is a very long-lasting memory. A very good example of this recently notable chess punk Neil Bruce posted a diagram from the very famous Capablanca Tartakower game from a book that he's currently working on, but he only posted the diagram of the position, and the question was that what would you play here? And I went like immediately like, oh yeah, that is the famous Capablanca Tartakower where he sacrifices a pawn and then he does an awesome king maneuver to hide his king starting from e3. He walks around and ends up behind the black f5 pawn, allowing him to hide the king and win. You can see already that with that example right there and then, I made a connection when I first saw that endgame, that something just went like, wow, that's awesome, man. And I understood it when I first saw it, what was going on there. And from there on, I had an appreciation for it. Another example in my life for these endgames was the very position that I have on the board for you right now, which comes from a supremely famous game played by Anatoly Karpov. Hello, surprise there with the endgame god, against Joel Lochier. And in this position, to the greatest surprise, even shock of the bystanders and the players, including Lochier, he took. And he actually went on to win this bishop ending with a pawn down for seemingly absolutely nothing. All he has is a good bishop, bad bishop scenario and a really bad pawn structure for black. Now, I'm not going to show you this. For the first time, I decided to do something different. I'm going to tell you, this is Karpov Lochier, 1992. You can look it up and find it. Alternatively, you can also find it in my Chessable course with Judith Polgar, Master Your Chess. But what I'm going to do now instead is I'm going to show you two endgames that influenced the way how I played those endgames, because I had this previous connection, in particular the Karpov Lochier game, where I went like, actually I reckon I can pull off something like that. So watch this. It was about 2 weeks ago actually. I was playing a game on stream and things went really well for me in the opening, but then I somehow messed things up in a real ugly fashion. And I ended up in this d5 pin, and I was really upset with myself because I felt like I botched a beautiful positional masterpiece. And in this position with my opponent to move, to my greatest shock, he decided to take with the rook. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, I took him, and once again, greatest shock, power 7, he takes with the rook again. And I'm like, what? I took the rook, we have this position, and I'm beginning to get some vibes, and I'm like, this reminds me of Karpov Lochier. And in fact, in many ways, this position is a lot better for me than the one I just showed you was for Karpov, because there is no way for black to stop me from regaining the material. And at this point, I went like, okay, until now, I was playing for a draw. Which, by the way, it should be. I mean, I'm worse, clearly, after takes on d4, but I don't really see how black can make any progress, to be honest, even after a simplistic move like f4. But after this, I'm like, all right, dude, I'm gonna come for you. So the first stage, and this is what you need to do and understand really well about endgames, and I purposely chose only same colored bishop endings for this video because they are extremely beautifully model this concept to the greatest effect, which is that in endgames you think the polar opposite of how you think in complex middle games. In endgames, you not only recommend it, but in fact you really should think in long-term plans, which is the what would I do if I were given 4 moves back to back. That type of thinking has no room whatsoever in a middle game scenario where your opponent's counter plans and the very rich tactical sources for both sides almost always completely eliminate such thinking, and you must think in variations. And this sort of switching the thinking is what a lot of club level players are either reluctant to accept that you can do, or they can't do it well enough. So my first plan here was that, okay, I'm gonna go for this pawn. And he actually won't be able to defend it because as soon as he gets to e5, I can check f4, and then I'm going to take d4. And since there is no better thing to do here for white whatsoever, I decided to not to, elongate this plan, or rather try to expand it and see what I would do after. I thought I can afford playing it out and think then. So this is what happened. There. I played f4, king d3 is just as fine, but I even decided to deny king e5 altogether. And now I have got 2 more moves to make. And black has nothing to do. The bishop here is completely glued to the pawn. So that is stuck, just like in the Karpov-Lotier game. So I am going to go, and he plays a g5, which by the way is the game-losing mistake. Very typical that in such positions, usually people don't know how to defend patiently by just doing nothing. Doing nothing, whether you are the defender or the attacker, is an art form in chess. And once again, Karpov was a god of it. Here g5 was a mistake. Instead, he should have just played to and fro and wait for me to show my hand that I actually have a plan to win. I'll show you why g5 was bad. g5, I played king d3. He took, and that's the losing mistake. Now this game is gone for good. And you would be like, but you are meant to trade pawns. Yes, that is true. But here the trade of the pawn came with a huge issue for black. And that issue was that at this point, having, by the way, 33 seconds on the clock, but I don't want to blow my own trumpet too hard here, I came up with a plan that I thought was entirely unstoppably winning. And that plan was the following. I thought, okay, he has done this, and thus created an avenue for me. So I'm going to do this. Completely unstoppable, because these squares... How do I make red? Somehow you can make red. These guys are not available for the king. And so I can do this. The bishop is completely glued to the other bishop. To the pawn. So that is not going anywhere. So I am going to go to h4 unstoppably. Now, at that point, my opponent must be on g6 to prevent this. And then stage 2 of the plan, and this is why I'm telling you that long-term planning is a crucially important, not even skill, but just mindset, that's how you think. Create a weakness, it's on the board, in fact, many of them. Find a way to attack them. That's our long-term plan. That's 5 moves. And I'm not even halfway through the plan, because when the king gets to g6 to deny king h5, comes stage 2 of the same plan, bringing the bishop in, giving a check. Now that's going to force the king away from g6, either here or here, at which point I'm going to slide down to e8, once again hitting the pawn, which means that the bishop must be passing to and fro here. Otherwise, I go here, and if he has to defend it, then my king goes in. Work with me here. And so, once I go bishop e8, I'm going to be able to come to d7, and black is going to run out of moves because the king will have to be defending both of these pawns. But it can't do that because the only square you can do that is on g6. So once I plant my white bishop on c8, the king is out of moves. By then the bishop will be on a8, which is also out of moves, and the Zugzwang wins the game for me. So now I amassed here a plan that is at least 15 moves deep or 10 plus, and yet super easy both to construct, to carry out, and it's extremely rewarding. I tell you what, you play this out in a game after thorough consideration, and I will show you exactly how the game went, and you will feel more satisfied, or at least as satisfied, as a queen sack fireworks followed by an awesome mate. It is just as rewarding. Bishop f3, king, bishop back to a8. Like I said, it works out like charm. And now after bishop e8, he did the only thing, which I also reckoned with, but I didn't mention because I wanted to leave the most beautiful part for last. He played king e7. So the idea was that if he goes here, I go here. Actually, now I don't know how we win a tempo though. Maybe... this leads to the same win that I had in the game. So I don't want to spoil that. But with black to move, with white to move here, king h5 wins. So what I would want to say is that if in this position it's black to move, then after bishop a8, bishop c8, black is in Zugzwang. And they have to give up one of the pawns, and with that the game. Absolutely beauty. Now, in the game, however, he played king e7. And I already saw it before I went into this, that here I have the most stellar win, which, by the way, is such a marvelous idea and motif, demonstrating what a curse this pawn structure is. I just played bishop here, and takes. But I think, did I already have the great idea of Tehi here? No, because the king goes here. So I'm still not good for this. So I pulled back to g6, king here, and now one pawn is a goner, guaranteed. So he played here, king h6. Actually, I a bit overhyped what I did, but you will get my point. Bishop e8, bishop b7. And now the defending idea for black is to keep my king locked in so that I can't get out. Because as soon as I can make way for the pawn, see ya. So I played h4. And now comes the very, very dark truth again about same colored bishop endings. Black is in Zugzwang. So again, if the bishop goes back to a8, I go here. And this is a really cruel move. Bishop here, king up, and now black is stuck. Because if they drop back, I go here. The bishop is trapped, the king has to move. And that means that my king is coming out, and this is a queen. Beautiful stuff. So instead, in the game, he played here after h4, king e7. And now I was allowed to put the icing on the cake. I'm sure that there are multiple ways to win this for white. But boy, this felt so good. King g7, even leaving the bishop on prey, and incredibly enough, I'm 4 moves away from home run, and yet black can't do a thing with a bishop. That is just such a rewarding, situation to be in. That's it. Bishop e8, bishop c8, up. I got a queen, and my opponent resigned here. So that was a really, really awesome feeling to win. But 2 days ago, I got into a far greater mess with white in this endgame. And again, you get to see that there is a connection or a link to the previous one. Same colored bishop ending again. And my opponent here plays queen f6. Now here I had plenty of time on the clock. And I needed it too. Because I wanted to figure out if in this position I should enter the bishop ending with queen f6 or queen e5. And the discovery that I have made here is made me so happy about the position, the performance, the calculation, everything. Like, it was just genuine, absolutely awesome excitement. The following line was my thinking. If I take, they are going to take back. They then will be able to play h6, right? Now, I can never ever use my king to penetrate this way because it gives way to the pawn and I won't be able to stop it. So my defense has to rely on take, putting my king on d4 and keeping my bishop on g4, denying the black king from coming and entering my position either way. And at that point, when I got to here to this calculation, I was just about to call it a draw. And then a motive hit me, and I was so happy that it did, because actually I saw it from a Spassky game, just to mention yet another endgame that is such a remarkable memory that you associate it with ideas. So if I have to take, let's say king f3, h6, king here, bishop g4, king d4, it's black to move. I really began to worry about black's plan of, and actually I played it out in stream and chat loved it for the Hikaru arrows. Black is doing this. Here, and here, and gets to my pawn. Actually, here. And I'm genuinely telling you that I was very, very, very worried about this plan. And then I decided that I should, instead of allowing this, go for a queen e5, which was my alternative plan. When my thinking was that after queen a5 takes, now he's going to be able to note the long-term thinking. g6, h6, king g7, g5, I can't stop. And then my long-term plan, which I didn't see that it was breakable, and it turned out to be correct, was to take my pawn on e5, and this is traded off for g6, h6, g5, so trade. I'm gonna play bishop g4. Now the black king can't penetrate because all of these squares are under my control. Yeah, the pawn on e5 covers f6, and they have a pawn on g5. So the king can't break in. My king will get to d4, and I'm gonna be able to hold the draw because there is no way for black to make progress. And 99% of what I just told you stands true. So I felt so good that I checked with the engine after, and almost everything I just said to you is true, except for one thing. And it really, I'm not even saying it hurts me, but it just reminds me that even in these long-term thinkings, you can't forget that tactics are there. Tactics always beat every kind of positional finesse. And it turns out that in this endgame scenario, which I highlighted for you as a possibility, where I just muck around waiting for black to come in. Sorry, king b7 here. The idea is that if the king goes too far in, like king b3, then bishop takes d5, secures the draw. And I miss this idea altogether. And the concept is that now after takes, king c3, you don't push. No, you just go for the rest of the pawns. And this is a draw because all black pawns are going to fall. I did miss this, and let's face it, I'm totally cool with that. Because it's such an obscure idea and an unexpected one. And for the record, if we disregard this, my fear about this king coming into here was actually fundamentally valid and real. And by now, black is winning. So actually, this crazy town plan was a very legitimate concept that I needed to consider, and I actually failed to evaluate correctly because of this marvelous counter-strike with bishop d5. But other than that, this would have been a winning chance to black. And by the way, black can sort of fine-tune this plan by playing bishop c4 at any point to secure the d5 pawn, but then I can slide the bishop down to d7 and force the bishop to go back. Long story short, contrary to my evaluation, both queen trades are drawing, so queen f6 and queen e5. I am still proud of the fact that I played queen e5 because this is the cleaner draw. The other one allows black at least a winning plan, whereas here I managed to hold beautifully and easily. So everything went according to plan. He played out h6, he played out g5, and then I can always go to g4 when the king comes to g6, right? So we started passing around, and this is exactly what I thought would come to a draw. Now, the real irony is that the game did end in a draw, but I actually should have won it because my opponent got too cocky and forgot about something. So what happened was that he tried to beat me, and I knew that he was trying to beat me by bringing the king up here, which is bad because then the pawn is going to run in. So I actually allowed it on purpose, because the trick here is that after king h5, I still can't go to e6 because the king goes back, catches up with the pawn, and I lose. But now, he's also not threatening to further penetrate with king h4 because then he's too far. So I played a pass, trying to tempt him, and note that now this is a real threat. So now the king has to go back, Because in contrast to the previous line, here after e7, I'm not threatening to promote when the king is on f7. But with bishop on d7, now if they play g4, which they did do, e6, and I'm winning because king e6, e7, and the bishop is supporting the promoting square. And so he completely messed this up, and we entered this endgame, and I actually managed to flag from here on. I took the g3 pawn out. I promoted the pawn, I got a queen, I took the pawn down, and by now I have got less than a second. Unfortunately, I flagged. But nonetheless, I think that the draw was the fair result, although my opponent definitely pushed it more than he could have or should have. But the long story short is that this idea of holding the position here with bishop g4 and the power of my passer and the fact that this bishop is not really doing much here allowed me to draw. So both of these endgames gave me immense satisfaction, no less than you know, a really flashy queen sack type of, you know, crazy attack of forcing your opponent's king out to the open and checkmate the heck out of them. I love that stuff, I really do. But I also love this stuff and the depth and the strategy and the really cool ideas that you get to display in an endgame in its purest form, and its real clarity that comes with the variations, and it's just like a Swiss clock. It just works so perfectly. I think that everyone at one point, if you expose yourself often enough to endgames, will come across an endgame that will leave an impact on your life. Like, oh boy, that is beautiful. I really want to play an endgame like that. And from there on, your endgame studies and your affinity to enter endgames and be excited about them will just skyrocket, and you will feel so much more confident playing endgames. And, you know, you will actually try your best to do your very best to play endgames to the best of your ability. I think that was about 5 bests in 2 sentences. So yeah, I really hope that that is going to be the way for you as well. And the best I can tell you there is just to regularly expose yourself for a period of time to various kinds of endgames. Alrighty folks, that's gonna be it for today from me. I appreciate your time with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, to sub, to comment, or to even super like if you can. Thank you very much, and I will be back with the next video soon. Bye.